Hey, what is up everyone? Welcome back to another video. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe for fast baseball news and other baseball content. In today's video, we're going to be grading every team's offseason from top to bottom. There were some other YouTubers that made videos like this. I had this video done a while ago, but I wanted to wait until the end of the offseason so I could keep updating it as people signed, but there are still some names unsigned, like Jackie Bradley Jr., Trevor Rosenthal, Taijuan Walker, Jake Odorizzi, Yoenis Cespedes, Yasbiel Puig, and some other names as well that could finish off a team and take them to the next level. So I'm going to start off with the San Diego Padres. They added Kim at shortstop slash left field, so he gives them some depth. He's a really good player who's played overseas the last couple years, and he has been a very productive player in other leagues. So I think he's going to have a very good time here in San Diego, and he could really take the team offensively to the next level and drive in a bunch of runs. For their bullpen to replace Rosenthal and Yates, they replaced them with Melanson and Kala. And for their rotation, they added Snell and Darvish, which obviously takes the rotation to the next level to compete with teams like the Dodgers. And they added Jurickson Profar, or re-signed him, I should say, to give them that bench depth. Going on to the Los Angeles Dodgers, the Padres' rivals, their notable additions were Trevor Bauer, Justin Turner, Corey Nebel, Tommy Kayley, and Blake Trinan. It's good to keep the team the way it was with Trinan and Turner, but they also added some big pieces to the bullpen like Nebel and Kahnle, and they added obviously Trevor Bauer, the reigning Cy Young winner, but they need to shed some salary. I mean, they're way over the luxury tax right now. It's a little bit excessive, but they really want to win, so I'm going to give them an A because they basically have the same team as they did last year, but they added on to it to make the team even better, so that's where they get an A from me. The Diamondbacks, they had an interesting offseason. They didn't really do much. They're obviously not going to be better than the Dodgers or the Padres just in one offseason, so I'm going to give them a D+. They did make some moves to make their bullpen a little bit better, and they added Asdrubal Cabrera for depth, but overall not really a good offseason, and they won't really pass the Giants either, so that's why I give them a D+. Going on to the Rockies, they're my first team to get an F. I gave them an F because they traded away their best player and $50 million with them for essentially not the best prospects. There are some prospects that came over from St. Louis in the blockbuster trade that have some upside, but I don't think any of those prospects have Arenado upside. And they also gave away $50 million. So I didn't really understand that trade at all. And Colorado just didn't really have the best offseason. There's been some turmoil between their own team as well. So not really the best offseason on and off the field. So that's why I give them an F. Let me know what you think about that. The Pittsburgh Pirates, I also gave an F because they traded away three of their best players for some prospects. Now, the Pirates do have some great prospects in that organization. They have Ke'Bryan Hayes. They have some other prospects with some upside like O'Neal Cruz, and they got some people back for Bell, Tyon, and Musgrove. So they are going to have a good team in the future. Just right now, they're not really the best. And this offseason, I feel like they could have handled it a bit better. Maybe they could have asked for a little bit more for these players and then moved them at the deadline, but it's already done. What can you do? So I'm going to give them an F, but they do have potential to be a good team in the future. Going on to the St. Louis Cardinals, we have an A. I gave them an A because they added Nolan Arenado to really complete their team, and they kept their veterans in Wainwright and Molina. Those two veterans are basically, they've been with the team forever. They mean a lot to the city, so that's why those moves were more bigger than they seemed. And Arenado also tops off the team. He completes them at third base. So now they have a good lineup and they're a lot better defensively. So that's why I give the Cardinals an A, and they're most likely going to win the division as well because their division isn't too special. Going on to the Milwaukee Brewers, I give them a B-. They had a good offseason, not the best, nothing that would really slingshot them over the Cardinals. They added Colton Wong. That was a nice move up the middle. They added Brett Anderson for their bullpen / rotation. And they also acquired Derek Fisher, who I doubt will make the team because they have Kane, Yelich, and Garcia already in the outfield. Maybe Fisher is a bench piece, but nothing too big from the Brewers to overtake the Cardinals, so I give them a B-, but Colton Wong was a nice addition. Going on to the Chicago Cubs, I give them a C because they traded away Darvish. They lost Schwarber, Lester, and Quintana to free agency, and they essentially replaced Darvish with Arrieta, who hasn't really been as solid the last couple of years. They replaced Lester and Quintana with Williams, and Williams has been good. You can get innings out of him. That's really his specialty. And they basically replaced Kyle Schwarber with Jock Peterson, who they're essentially a very similar player. Lots of power, not the best defensively, not the fastest, but powers the game. So they basically replaced Schwarber with Peterson. They replaced Darvish with Arrieta, and Williams fills the rotation slot. So that's why I give them a C. Not really the best. They do still have some good names over on the team like Baez and Bryant and Rizzo, Contreras and Hayward. So they're definitely, if they're all playing well, they're going to be a team to reckon with. But just I gave them a C because their offseason wasn't that good. Going on to the Cincinnati Reds, I'm going to give them a D plus because they lost Trevor Bauer and Raisel Iglesias. They also lost Archie Bradley, who I didn't have on that list, but to replace Iglesias and Bradley, they signed Doolittle and Holder. Pretty much downgrades, but they replaced the arms in their bullpen and they added some depth up the middle with D. Gordon. They're still in need of a shortstop, but they do have some good names over there. They have Castillo, they have Gray, they have Suarez. They have Moustakas, Joey Votto, he's getting a little bit old, and Castellanos, and Winkler, so they do have some good players over there, but they just haven't really been able to click as well as a team on paper that well should click. So it's going to be interesting to see how they perform this year, especially now that they lost the Cy Young winner. So I give them a D plus because they sort of got worse in the offseason. Let me know what you think about that down in the comments. Going on to the New York Mets, they are the first team on this list to get an A+, I believe, unless I gave it to somebody else. But they get an A+ because they got Francisco Lindor, which fills the shortstop need that they wanted to improve. They got Carlos Carrasco, which is a solid starter that they wanted for the middle of the rotation. They got Jonathan Villar for infield depth, Kevin Pillar for outfield depth, McCain behind the dish. They needed a catcher, and they also lost out on Realmuto. And McCain was actually underrated. He had very similar stats to Realmuto, and Realmuto got like $80 million more than him. So that's something to be interested in. I know lots of you Mets fans might think it was a downgrade, maybe not, but it wasn't really that much of a downgrade when you look on it on paper. So good news for the Mets. They also added Trevor May to their bullpen. They're still in need of some more bullpen help, but Trevor May is a good start. And they also added some prospects in the Andrew Benintendi trade. They added an outfielder who has lots of upside. So good offseason for the Mets. They're planning for the future and the now. So overall, A+ for them. Going on to the Nationals, I'm going to give them an A- because they're in a very tough division with the Mets and the Braves and the Phillies, but they were able to add Kyle Schwarber, which gives them some pop behind Trey Turner and Juan Soto. They also added Josh Bell, who is a pretty good hitter. He's going to be in the middle of the lineup, probably going to put up some big numbers. They got John Lester to fill a spot in the rotation. That's more just to get innings out of him. They added Brad Hand as their closer, and they needed a closing help, especially after losing Doolittle. And they also brought back their veteran Zimmerman, which I don't know how much he's going to play with Bell over at first base, but good signing. It wasn't really expensive for them, so that's why they get an A- from me. Going on to Miami, they actually had a pretty solid but underrated offseason. They're obviously not going to win that division, but they added Duvall on a pretty team-friendly contract considering Duvall's skills. They added Anthony Bass and Dylan Floro to their bullpen, so Miami's going to have a good, solid young team, but they're a couple years away from being the first-place team. Going on to the Philadelphia Phillies, a team that had the worst bullpen in MLB history last year. They were able to add some arms like Bradley, Kinsler, Watson, Alvarado. So they improved their bullpen a lot. They give Girardi more options. I'm going to give them a B+ because they were also able to bring back Realmuto and Gregorius and stop some rival teams from getting those players and improve their bullpen. Maybe they could get up to an A if they added another bullpen arm like Rosenthal and a starter like Walker or Odorizzi. So they definitely could get to an A, but I think they're pretty much done for now, and they had a pretty solid offseason. Going on to the Atlanta Braves, I'm going to give them an A. So they added Charlie Morton and Drew Smyly to complete their rotation. The 5-man, it's one of the scariest rotations in the MLB. They added Ozuna, or they kept Ozuna, I should say, in their outfield. If they get a DH, he'll probably be able to perform a lot better, but he was a huge part of the team last year. And they also added Jason Kipnis for some infield depth. So if Swansby or Aussies gets injured, they can go to Kipnis, and they know that they have a trustable guy in him. They did, however, lose out on Melanson and Duvall, but they replaced Duvall and they replaced Melanson with some other arms and other players. So not too bad of an offseason from them. They get an A from me. Going on to the Houston Astros, didn't really have the best offseason. They were able to keep Michael Brantley and get Baez, but they do get a C+ because they did lose George Springer. So that's basically it for the Astros. From me, they get a C+. Going on to the Rangers, they get a C. They did add Chris Davis and David Dahl in their outfield, and they added Folty as a starter, and they added some prospects as well in some trades in the trade for Lance Lynn. They did lose Corey Kluber, though, but the Davis deal, what they're trying to do there is try to hit as many home runs as possible with Gallo and Davis hitting in the middle of that lineup. Dahl gives them some on-base abilities and some speed in the lineup, so good overall offseason from the Rangers. They're still not going to win the division, most likely, but decent. Going on to the Los Angeles Angels. The Angels were a disappointment this offseason. To put it into perspective, they already had a really good team with Rendon and Trout, but they needed starters, quality starters like Trevor Bauer. They were basically walking around with no shirt, shopping for shoes when they already had shoes, if that makes sense. They already had the star players, but they just wanted to keep adding more, not really add quality starters. They added Quintana and Cobb, two people who can give them innings when they're healthy, but they're not going to take the Angels to the next level. They also added Raisel Iglesias. That was a good move for the bullpen. They added Suzuki behind the plate. They already had Max Stacy and some other catching pieces back there, so that didn't really make sense. And they also added Jose Iglesias, which replaces Andrelton Simmons. So a defensive, not really defensive upgrade, sorry, offensive upgrade with Iglesias, but a defensive downgrade with Iglesias than Simmons. The bullpen got better with Raisel Iglesias, but the rotation, I don't really see it getting a lot better. They do have Bundy and they have Heaney, so I don't know if that will be enough to take them to the playoffs. Going on to the Oakland Athletics, a team that quietly had a decent offseason, but they did lose some big pieces. So they added Elvis Andrus at shortstop. They needed someone to stay there, but Andrus is going to be there for the next 3 years because he has 2 years making $15 million, and he has a player option for the third year where he will make $15 million. So not a team-friendly contract because he doesn't produce at that level anymore. They added Adam Kolarek, who's a good piece for the bullpen. He's been underrated, very good pitcher. They added Romo and Petit to the bullpen, so those are some good adds. They added some prospects, but they did lose Liam Hendricks, Marcus Semien, Robbie Grossman, Tommy LaStella, and Chris Davis. So they didn't really get a lot better offensively, but their bullpen got a lot better, so they're going to get a C from me. Going on to Seattle, they are also going to get a C because they didn't really make that many additions to their team. They added Ken Giles and James Paxton, two very good players, but they're not really the healthiest right now. Both of them have been dealing with some injuries, so decent year if they're healthy, or decent moves if they're healthy, so they get a C for me. The Detroit Tigers silently had a pretty good offseason. They're not going to be the best team, but they're going to be a fun team to watch. They're going to hit lots of home runs with Nunez, Scope, and Mazzara in that lineup, and they have some on-base ability with Grossman, defensive skill there as well. So a decent offseason from the Tigers. Still not going to win the division, but they're going to be a fun team to watch, and they also have some very good prospects over there. Talking about the KC Royals right now, they actually had a really good offseason. I'm going to give them a B because they added Santana, Benintendi to their lineup, which gives them some pop and some on-base percentage. Benintendi was supposed to be one of the best outfielders in the game when he first came up. He slowed down a bit. He wasn't really supposed to hit that ceiling after watching last year, but that was only 50 games that he played, so he could still bounce back and become the player that he was supposed to be. And they also added Mike Minor to the rotation, so they're going to be a pretty good team. They're going to be one of those teams that always gives it their all and doesn't just, fall out of the race, so they get a B for me. Going on to the Cleveland Indians, they had an interesting offseason. They added Ahmed Rosario, Eddie Rosario, Cesar Hernandez, and Andres Jimenez up. So infielders and Rosario as an outfielder. It gives them some pop, some prospects. Rosario and Jimenez have some upside, but they lost Lindor, Carrasco, Santana, and Hand. So I do feel this offseason they got worse, not better. So I'm going to give them a B- because they still added some players for the future, but they got worse as of right now. Talking about the White Sox, they added Lance Lynn, Hendricks, and Eden. I'm going to give them an A+ because they already had a super good team and they needed some pieces to complete the team, and now their team has been completed with these 3 moves. So I'm going to give them an A+. They're going to be one of the best teams this year. Talking about the San Francisco Giants, don't know why they're all the way up here, but they added Kevin Gausman, Tommy La Stella, Matt Weisler, Brabia, McGee, Wood, and DeSclafani. So they added some rotation pieces. They added some pieces in their lineup and the bullpen. So they really added all-around players. Very good offseason for them. They're obviously not going to be better than the Padres or the Dodgers, but they're going to be a team that doesn't go away too easily. And, maybe in a couple years, they have some good prospects over there. They got Joey Bart to replace Buster Posey, so they're actually going to be a good team. Talking about the Minnesota Twins, they kept Cruz, they got Colomé, they got Happ, they got Shoemaker, they got Simmons. They are really good defensively with Simmons, especially now they're a lot better defensively. They added some pitching help, especially in the bullpen with Colomé. He gives them some good pitching help and depth, and Happ and Shoemaker gives them some rotation depth, and then Cruz is there to hit his home runs like always. Good offseason for them. I give them a B+. The Baltimore Orioles, I'm going to give them an F because they're sort of banking on former good players to be good, even though they've sort of fallen off. They got Felix Hernandez, used to be one of the best pitchers in the MLB, hasn't been in a long time. They're banking on him to get back to his old self. Same with Matt Harvey, hasn't been good for a while, and they're sort of banking on him. Freddie Galvis, shortstop, he gives them some depth. Not really the best player anymore, but he is good in the clubhouse. And they also got Yomer Sanchez at the beginning of the offseason off waivers from the White Sox, who gives them some infield depth as well. Not really the best offseason, but they do have a good future over there. They got Rushman and Mountcastle. So the Orioles will be good in the future, but the AL East is a very hard division. The Boston Red Sox made a lot of moves this offseason. Their main loss was Andrew Benintendi. I'm actually going to give them a B, even though they lost Benintendi. They added Ottavino for their bullpen. They added Prospect. Even though he's played like 5 seasons, he's still registered as a prospect because he hasn't played them full. Franchi Cordero, who has some pop and some speed in the outfield. Garrett Richards for the rotation. Again, he's a veteran righty who can give them some innings, what they needed. Hunter Renfroe, who has some pop in the outfield, that played for Tampa Bay last year, very good defensively as well. Marwin Gonzalez, who a lot of people don't really like because of his cheating scandal in Houston. All of them did it, but he took a lot of flames for it as well. So he's some infield depth. Kike Hernandez, which is one of the MLB favorites players. He has lots of character. Going to be very good there in Boston. He was basically their main addition this offseason. So decent offseason from Boston. Again, I don't think it's going to win them the division or even the wild card, but they're going to be a team that's going to be hard to beat. The Tampa Bay Rays actually got worse this offseason. I'm going to give them a C- because they lost Blake Snell and Charlie Morton, 2 guys that helped them get to the World Series, and they added 41-year-old Rich Hill, Colin McHugh, who's sort of fallen off since he left Houston, and Chris Archer, who fell off once he went into Pittsburgh. Maybe they all find their old selves in Tampa Bay, but I don't know. They didn't get better. Tampa Bay has an interesting strategy. Throw whoever's out there, see what they can do. If they're playing well, keep them out there for as little cost as possible. So they're doing what they're doing, and it works sometimes, so good for them. I give them a C- though. The Toronto Blue Jays, I'm going to give them an A. The only reason I didn't give them an A+ is because the rotation is not the best, but they added Steven Matz, who could be in the rotation or the bullpen. They added George Springer, who's going to be an X factor on that team. They added Marcus Semien, which is going to be another X factor on the team offensively. They added Kirby Yates as their closer, which they needed another bullpen arm. They added Chatwood as the starter / bullpen man. Basically Tanner Rourke, except he makes like $8 million less. They added Joe Panic for some infield depth. They added Phelps for some bullpen depth, and they added Ray for the rotation. So a good overall offseason from the Blue Jays. I'm going to give them an A. And now our final team, the New York Yankees, I'm giving them an A+. They really just needed to improve their pitching staff, which they did. If Corey Kluber can stay healthy, he's going to be a big part of the team. They added him on a one-year, $11 million deal. They also acquired Jameson Taillon from the Pittsburgh Pirates, who, when he is healthy, is also really good, and they got him for not a lot in return, so that was a good move by them. They also added Jay Bruce as a left-handed outfield bat with some pop, so that's a good move for them. Maybe replaces Brett Gardner. They added Wilson in their bullpen, so that gives them some bullpen depth that they needed, especially as a lefty. They were able to keep DJ LeMahieu, keep LeMahieu out of the hands of their rivals like the Blue Jays. They added Darren O'Day, veteran reliever, in the bullpen, which they needed. And they also added Chirinos behind the plate in case Higashioka or Sanchez aren't producing well, if they have some catching depth there. So that's my entire list of grading every team's offseason. Let me know what you think about this down in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys in the next one.